just like the vote that we saw in Iraq last week, I have a letter from a Marine general telling what he saw the day when they were voting last week. They left their children home, and he says in that country you never see a mother or grandmother without their children or grandchildren. They don't separate. But that day they were without their children and grandchildren because they didn't want to put them in jeopardy as they went to vote. And he says this general stopped and talked, and all day long everybody had their fingers on the trigger, ready for some kind of action or violence. And people, husbands and wives, didn't go into the polling place together because they were worried about a bomb or losing their life, but they still went and voted, came out with that die on their fingers. That's how important and sacred the right to vote is. And we're talking now about taking that right away from people. I think this is something that people, when they realize it, are going to get very engaged in, and hopefully they'll do what you suggest with letters, phone calls, and then call their friends and relatives. We had a company in our district that employs several hundred people, and a person thought that they should be represented by the union, and he got enough signatures, apparently a very persuasive individual, to get the 30% to have an election. They had the election. Turned out at the end of the day, one person voted for the union, even though 30% out of several hundred had actually voted to have the election. You know, sometimes we feel like, you know, a colleague, a neighbor at work, right, we feel some intimidation, you know. Even though we don't feel like it's what we want, we sign the card check. But knowing that at the end of the day, we'll be able to go in a secret ballot way, vote our real feelings. And now we're talking about, or people are talking about, taking that away.
Right.
You mentioned California. The chairman of the committee who is bringing this bill is from my state, and I don't I don't want to judge his intentions or his what his motivations are, but we brought it out. In fact, I read it during the hearing when we were working on this bill in committee, a letter that he had written to a foreign government down in South America asking for them to make sure that in their country they had secret ballot for these unions that they were trying to get organized. And I thought, let's see, it's good enough for Colombia or Venezuela, well, why shouldn't we have it for our workers? Here he's fighting to push the bill through to take that right away here while he's asking for it down there. And you remember, we had an article in the paper, you know, they just had a big leadership fight on the other side of the aisle, and Mr. Dingell, who we just voted today to honor as the longest serving member of the House of Representatives, lost his position as chairman of a very important committee here in Congress. And several members on their side were quoted as saying, thank goodness we have a secret ballot to make this vote. And it was a fairly close vote.
So they cherish their right to a secret ballot.
Amazing.
But yet are trying to move legislation that would essentially take that away. And it's very striking that the chairman of the committee endorsed secret ballot in another country and is moving this legislation now. You know, and it strikes me as I hear you talk about the experience of many companies where maybe 30% of the company will sign a card in public that they'll have an election, and then in the one case 1% vote. But who among us couldn't understand that? I work with people, in this case I work with members of Congress like you. You know, if I don't have to say no to my friends, I don't like to say no. But when I go in and pull the curtain shut, I'm going to make the best decision that I can make for my family. And I'm going to follow my values, and I'm going to follow my common sense. And it's in that moment that we want employees to be able to make a decision about unionization. I love your comment about your own family's experience, and I can tell how genuine it is. Where there are people who need a union to defend their dignity and defend their rights as employees, we will always fight for the right of those people to elect and choose to join a union. That's part of being an American too. But But this notion of taking away that secret ballot. On the subject of colleagues, I was really struck. I was reminded of one of the first encounters you and I had on the House floor that I'll just never forget. And it maybe it'd be a little bit of a challenge to viewers who may have a member of Congress in the other political party. There was an occasion where the Republican Party, then in the majority, was bringing a bill to the floor that ultimately was taking the rights away from some Americans. In this case, it was peaceful protesters outside of abortion clinics. Well, the Republican leadership was behind the bill. It was a bankruptcy bill, and you remember what I'm talking about. They brought it to the floor even though many of us were concerned about it. And so a handful of us gaggled together and said, even though the Republican leadership, and I believe the Republican president, wanted this bill to pass, we searched our hearts and said, this isn't what we came here to do. We didn't come here to take away the rights of any American to engage in a peaceful protest for whatever are the dictates of their conscience. And I'll never forget the day you walked up to the group of us on the floor, and being a senior member of the Republican conference, and a guy who was then, and like you are now, in Republican leadership, and you walked up to me on the floor and said, what's happening here? And we filled you in on it. And I remember saying to you, I was a freshman, I said, Mr. McKeon, I'll certainly understand, if you can't be with us. And you looked me right in the eye and you said, I'm with you all the way. Our Republican leadership is wrong. And you walked over and you cast a vote and took on the Republican president, took on the Republican leadership, and we brought that bill down. And we were able to bring that bankruptcy bill back without the provision that eroded the rights of peaceful protesters. So, I'm not asking people to do in the other party something we've never done before. And it is tough sometimes to dig down into your values and challenge the members of your own party and even your own president on the House floor. But this is one of those gut check times. And for people that might be looking in, number one, I'm glad to let them know they have the kind of congressman who puts the interests of the American people and their values above party interests. But this is one of those moments where we would hope members of the Democratic majority would do the same.
I, again, appreciate your kind words. But you were one of the leaders in that effort, and you've led the fight a couple of times, at least, probably several times, against our leadership when they were wrong. And you were right, and right has might, as you know. And that's why you're now one of our elected leaders, because you have there's a lot of respect for you within our conference, and should be. You've led some good fights, and you'll be leading a whole lot more. You're a young man that has a great future ahead of you. When you refer to me as a senior Republican, I think of how old I'm getting, and somebody was telling me the other day, says, you can say anything you want. What can they do to you? At the same time, you've been there, seen that, done that. Anyway, I think again, I want to thank you for being here, and I think we've had a good discussion, and I'm hopeful that people have learned from this, and will be able to really go through and do some of the things. Maybe if they feel like the things we've talked about are good, that they will let other people know. Anyway, that's it for our show today. I think what we've talked about, you have a chance to see that what we're talking about is not just bad for business, it's really bad for the workers. And a lot of times the other side tries to put us on the defensive, tries to make it out that we're against the worker or we're against unions. Not the case. Study this issue, and you will see that we're on the side of the worker on this, that it's very important that they retain the right for the secret ballot election to determine their fate and the fate of their families. Thank you very much. And until next time, Buck McKeon from Washington, thanks for watching.